Welcome to Invisible Sidekick, a podcast where I sit down and chat with the creative masterminds behind some of your favourite music campaigns. My name is Cam, I've been a creative in music for nearly 10 years, and over the last decade I've crossed paths with some of the best creative talent in the industry, and I've managed to talk some of them into featuring in this series. This week's sidekick is music photographer Nicholas O'Donnell. Welcome, Nick. How you doing, mate?
Not too bad, Cam. How are you keeping?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, mate. Yeah, all good. So Christmas is over and done with now. So it's a new year full of hopefully new projects.
That's it. Let's do this.
Let's go. So first of all, let me start by saying thank you so much for agreeing to do this, because I know that podcasting isn't for everyone, and I know that sitting and talking about yourself isn't for everyone either, because it can be a bit awkward. But it's just going to be a chill vibe where we're just going to sit and talk shit about photography for the next half an hour, and hopefully answer some questions that any listeners might be wondering about the photography industry and how you got into it and how to get into it. So we've both got our coffees at the ready.
We do indeed.
And what are you drinking at the moment then?
I'm just drinking some some granulated stuff from a mug that says, "Yes, I really do need all these plants."
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. I'm drinking from like a little mini flask thing that my nephew got me for Christmas. It says Uncle Saurus.
Honestly, some of these mug phrases are just very out there. It's great.
Yeah, it seems to become like a thing that people now collect mugs.
100%. You can show the personality.
Yeah, show your personality through the power of mugs. And let the mugs do the talking sometimes as well, because I've seen some mugs that have pretty aggressive statements on them. Anyway, moving on. So let's get straight into it. So you're a photographer, and a pretty shit-hot photographer as well. If you've not seen Nick's work, I will link it, so check it out. So how did it all start for you? What was young Nick like? Was you creative?
Okay, perfect. So I think young Nick was never actually really a creative. I think growing up, I kind of went through phases of getting hooked on things. So at one stage, obviously as a young boy, I was obsessed with football. And then it went from football to table tennis. I was playing that 6 nights a week. And then it went from that to golf. I was playing that 6 days a week. And then it came to a point where I'd go through so many things. And my parents didn't really think I'd stick at anything. And then I kind of discovered photography when I was 14. I discovered it on a friend's family road trip. And as cliche as it sounds, something just clicked. And then kind of just started from there, and then I think the kind of creativity then kind of started really coming then. So like I said before, I wasn't really creative, but then around the age of 14 I kind of got a lot more creative when I discovered photography.
And when you discovered photography, can you remember the first ever camera that you got?
Yeah, so I suppose the first ever camera I ever got was I was taking pictures when I first discovered it on like a old phone, and then I bought a bridge camera. So a bridge camera is like in between a compact camera and a SLR, so a compact camera you can't swap the lens, but with an SLR you can swap the lens. So hence the name bridge camera. So that was the first camera I got. It was Nikon Coolpix. Forget the model, but it was perfect. It started me off.
Yeah, I can still remember my first ever laptop. It was this big, massive, heavy, blocky thing that was the size of a briefcase. But I ran that bastard into the ground when I was learning my dodgy version of Photoshop all them years ago. It became a bit of a fire as it didn't end. Do you ever get a bit pissed off at how easy it is for anyone to take a decent picture on an iPhone these days? Because some of the cameras that you get on these phones are shit art. So do you ever feel a little bit threatened?
I think that the more I kind of go along, I think I'm not really against it anymore, to be honest. I think because like photography is such a beautiful thing in the sense of anyone can take a picture, but not anyone can kind of make a career from it. And I think even the phone camera is so good these days. There's this photographer called Greg Williams. He's like a celebrity photographer, and he says to always carry a camera around with him, even if it's like a iPhone camera, because you can still get some like beautiful shots. Like I got a book by him recently, and he has a photo of Matt Damon in the water, and he took it on an iPhone 12. So it just goes to show that you don't need a great camera to take a great picture.
Yeah, and I think most people can take a picture with a camera without having to think about it. But and most people can learn how to use a camera, unless your mum and dad who can't even use a TV remote or a phone for that matter. but there's so much more involved. It's not just a case of turning up, like having your camera ready and just shooting pictures.
Not at all.
So that actually brings me on nicely to you telling me about planning shoots, and as we've just spoke about, it's not all about the camera, it's actually about everything else that's involved. So talk me through
It
it.
is. So like in terms of planning a shoot, so first thing to do is kind of talk to the client, see what they want, maybe to get them to create a mood board of image, like of kind of shots they can reference from. So that gives me the idea of what they're aiming towards, and obviously to get a brief. So say if we're working on some artwork for, say, a single cover or an EP cover or an artwork album, to get a brief and like a brief description of what the album's about. And from there, then I kind of pick and choose keywords, and then it goes on to choosing a location that suits that, and then looking at like the likes of Pinterest, which is great for inspiration, but it's the problem. The key is not to kind of, not to copy a shot of Pinterest, because I think nowadays it's very easy to copy ideas.
Yeah, it
I
is.
think everyone does it even without knowing.
Hmm.
So it's great to get like bits and pieces.
Do you know what? I used to cringe at people using Pinterest years ago when I was in my early 20s because it was such a cringy platform.
Yeah,
And it was such a prime, like, a. It was such evidence that you were old or you were getting old. And now I'm in my mid 30s. I use Pinterest more than I ever thought I would ever use Pinterest. But it is such a great tool, especially when you're making mood boards, for clients.
it's just like Instagram ads.
Yeah, it is. And I don't know what they do, but you can find things on Pinterest that you just can't find on a search engine. So you can't find it on Google, you can't find it on Instagram. It's like they've got access to
Hey, it's mental.
like how are they doing it? Where are they getting this content from? Because I need it more so than I ever thought I would do in my 30s. But you can spend too much time on Pinterest or on Instagram or looking at inspiration to the point where it actually flattens your creativity. And it can be a bit, it can be counterproductive because you can work too hard on trying to get inspired, but you end up being a bit of a copycat. So I'm always cautious of that. I know when to take a step back.
Completely. I think I'll just one more thing on that. I think the flip side to that is if you spend too much time trying to think of an original idea, I feel like it could be quite easy to get bogged down on that. So I
Yeah.
think it's nothing wrong with kind of diving into interest and kind of getting bits to kind of help you move along your ideas.
So if you're on set and you've got a client that you've never worked with before, who are maybe not as used to being in front of the camera, and they're a bit nervous,
Yeah.
and it shows in the shots that you're taking, how do you settle them down? What's your processes to make them more at ease in front of the camera?
Yeah, of course. I think so if say if I'm doing a studio shoot, which is say about maybe like 4 hours, a half day, I always look at it as the first hour. The shots are never going to be that great because you're kind of just getting into it.
Yeah.
And I always tell the client to have fun and not to worry. And I kind of tend to like not be too serious on set. Like it obviously depends. If you're working with a big team and a big budget, then you have to be somewhat serious. But a lot of shoots I do are kind of with smaller artists, so it kind of gives you a chance to kind of be yourself and not take it too seriously. And then when the client sees that, it kind of gives them a chance to relax more. And yes, I think it's with a shoot, just the first hour, I never really think it was you'll get the shot. And then as the time progresses in the shoot, the client becomes more comfortable, and just through chatting to them and even getting them to play music they like, it helps a lot. So it's also something to just talk about.
And does that get easier the more you get to know them? Like if you have an artist that you've shot before or you're used to being around, I'm guessing it makes it easier the more you know him.
100%.
So you're shooting Tom Grennan at the moment, and you've been shooting him for a while. So I'm guessing that, which are great shots by the way. I've been looking at them all.
Thank you.
So I'm guessing that you now know what Tom likes because you've spent that much time with him. You know him more as a person, so you'll know what shots he likes to be taken. You know what shots that he's probably going to approve and stuff. So I'm guessing you being around them, getting to know them a bit more, makes your job a bit easier.
100%, because the more you work with an artist, you build up a friendship. And that's the beauty of working with an artist over time. You can kind of become friends, and if you want to try something that's maybe a bit out there, they're more up for it, and they become a lot more comfortable around you. It's like, especially he almost forgets that the camera's in the room sometimes, and like that's the most important thing.
Yeah, do you know what? That's probably the best way to be honest, because I hate having my picture taken. The thought of somebody following me around with a camera would get on my tits, to be honest. But
Yeah,
I think you sort of like have to forget they're there, so you get more of a candid shot and you get more natural shots that are not like overly posed.
definitely. And I think there's nothing wrong with doing pose shots, because I always like, if I'm ever on a if it's ever a gig day with Tom, I always try and get a few pose shots before he goes on stage.
And who were your inspirations, Nick? Who inspired you to want to be a photographer?
So I went through different genres of photography. When I started off, it's funny because when I first started off doing photography, I did purely landscape for about a year, 2 years, and I actually hated photographing people. I refused to for a long time. I
No
don't know why.
way. That surprises me largely because you're so damn good at it. Why was that?
I think it just came down to a landscape. It's a still image. You don't have to talk to the person. You can kind of just focus on the landscape, and I think it becomes easier in some sense. And then, but it's actually, like, looking back, I think it was great because for like composition wise, the likes of Rules of Third, learning how to compose a landscape image, I can kind of bring that into my kind of live stuff. For instance, so say if I'm doing shooting a live concert, I'll look at, like, say, a wire coming out from a corner. What I'll do is I'll crop the image in that the wire comes into the image right from a corner, so it kind of leads the viewer in.
Yeah, definitely.
So like small things like that have helped, and then progressed from then doing landscape to nightclub photography. I wanted to become a war photographer at one stage, and then I was even doing
You wanted to become a what?
a war photographer.
A
Just go
war
out to
photographer.
war zones and photograph war, essentially, which is ridiculous because nowadays,
That's crazy. You'd probably get a lot of work nowadays, to be fair.
yeah, literally. But it's just becoming so dangerous. Like, even back in the day, you'd have photographers getting killed in war zones, but nowadays it's becoming a lot more prominent, just because.
But you know what? There is a Sky News reporter, I think it is, and she's what's her name? Alex Crawford, I think her name is, and she I'll have to check that, but I think it is Alex Crawford.
Yeah, that's her.
But she is literally in the middle of, like, she's in harm's way all the time, and she just does not give a shit. She's just there to report on the goings on in the world and that, and she could be shot and blown up in any second, and she just don't care. She's made of steel.
It just takes a certain balls to do.
Yeah, she's fucking mad. Every credit to her. She's a brave lady. But what I will say, some of the most iconic photographs have been taken in a war zone.
Oh, completely. But looking back at that, I'm quite happy just to not be in a war zone.
Yeah, safety over creativity always.
100%.
Right, now that we've lowered the tone talking about war, was there ever a time in your career where you thought, I don't want to do this anymore, fuck it?
Yeah, I think there's been a few instances. Like, I think over the last so many years, I've kind of burnt out quite a bit. But I think one thing that kind of sticks out is last year, I believe, my camera equipment got robbed.
No way.
Yeah, so that was a bit of a kick in the balls. It was also after doing a cover shoot with Big Narsty and a gig that evening.
Oh, shit.
That was quite disheartening, but luckily I've bounced back. Like, I have a lot of great people around me that kind of chipped in to kind of help me get back to where I was, and I'll be forever grateful for that. So that was definitely a low point for me.
Yeah, but you can replace a camera. What you can't replace is, your mind and your ideas.
That's it. For me, the biggest thing was the shoots I had. Like, I had a hard drive as well. Two hard drives in my bag. One was I was just trying to fix, and the other one. So all the shoots that I hadn't backed up were gone. So that was, I think, the biggest kick in the teeth.
Oh, that is the worst nightmare of mine, that is to be in the middle of a project and something happens, like my computer gets stolen or my hard drive gets stolen. I mean, how do you even explain that?
You can't. It's like, the only thing you can do is just explain to the client, and they understand, because it's one of those things you can't get it back, and you kind of have to bite the bullet and move on,
Yeah.
rather than being too involved. Anyway.
So I had a proper shit show a few years ago. My dad bought me some new noise cancelling headphones. And if there was ever a review or an advertisement to how good these headphones are, then this is it. And JBL should definitely sponsor this podcast, because your headphones damn nearly fucking killed me. So I was working away in my office, and I'd been working away for about maybe an hour or so, and I seen smoke in the corner of my eye coming through my office door, and my office is at the back of my apartment. So obviously ripped my headphones off, and I could hear screaming, I could hear the alarms going off, but I couldn't hear them with the headphones on. So unbeknownst to me, it was chaos outside, because my neighbour who lives across the hall had accidentally set her kitchen on fire with a chip pan.
Oh no.
So I came running out of my office. My entire flat was full of smoke. The only way out was through the front door, because I'm in an upstairs apartment and there's no way I'm going to start jumping out of windows. Definitely not. So as I left, I had to go through the front door, which was terrifying, by the way. And I actually ran back up the stairs to come back into my office to grab my laptop and my hard drive, so I didn't lose most of that year's work. So I risked my life for my clients. Not being dramatic. The fire weren't that bad, but I didn't know at that time. So if you ever want some peace and quiet, or you want to be cut off from the world completely, then get yourself some JBL headphones. And the funny thing is I thought I caused it, because earlier that day I bought a new George Foreman grill, and I left it on in my kitchen to burn off before I use it. So I thought it was me, because I'd forgot about it, but it weren't. It was my neighbour in a chip pan. So yeah, if there's a lesson to be learned from this, buy an air fryer. Stop using chip pans.
Oh, mate, 100%. And the thing is, I would have done the same. I would have ran back and saved my hard drives and my laptop and my camera.
Yeah,
It's just, look at those things.
yeah. I mean, I can replace a couch and I can replace the TV. What I can't replace is all the work I've already done.
100%. And the thing with the hard drives is, you can, if worse comes to worse and everything is ruined and you need money, you have a catalogue of stuff that you can kind of use to kind of somehow pay for it back.
Exactly. Anyway, moving on.
Sorry, have you seen The Office, Cam?
Do you know what? I really enjoy telling people that I've never seen an episode of The Office.
Okay, but there's an episode where Michael Scott, the boss, he likes to make his breakfast in the morning. So what he does is he has his George Foreman in the bed, and one morning he comes into work and he had toasted his foot on the George Foreman.
See, get an air fryer. Much safer all round. Are we talking about the English version?
American version.
See, I don't watch American versions since they redid Shameless for the American audience. Really put me off.
Yeah, that would kind of put you off.
Yeah, but there was a time that I would only ever listen to American music, but I would never really listen to anything that come from the UK. But that's kind of flipped the other way around now that I work in music. Who did you listen to? What music were you into?
So I was never hugely into music growing up. I think like the likes of Rolling Stones, Johnny Cash. I was big into like classic music, and then when I got into my early teens, it was a lot of Skrillex. You know, his golden era of music.
Yes.
And then Macklemore was a big one as well. I remember that was the first album I bought.
Yeah, I love Macklemore. Macklemore music was sick. He needs to come back.
He's great.
He seems like such
He's
a
so
cool
good. I love
guy.
his style.
Yeah.
I love his like big influence with golf.
Yeah, he needs to come back with some new music. Like, come back, Ryan.
I know. And then Ryan Lewis as well. I
Yes.
worked with him on a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Thrift Shop. What a banger. So that leads me on nicely, actually, to who would you like to photograph, dead or alive? If you weren't a photographer, I wouldn't feel the need to explain that. I mean, like, people who have passed away, rather than, like, dead bodies.
Of course. So I think definitely Jimi Hendrix, and then Jim Morrison.
Do you know what? Now that you've actually mentioned it, I can definitely see their influence on your work.
Because like Jimi Hendrix is the greatest.
Yeah, icon.
Like that gig where he set the guitar on fire is just like, it's historical. Yeah, and then obviously like David Bowie, because he's gone through so many different styles. Like he's like influenced so many different people. Like even like it's mad because you look at David Bowie's first album and there's a song called The Laughing Gnome, and people regard it as either his best song or his worst song because you literally have Alvin and the Chipmunks on it.
No way.
Yeah, it's just like three laughing chipmunks. Like it's very out there. It's very much David Bowie, and it just goes. It's great to see because it shows like his how he's progressed from such unique music to becoming mainstream, but yet keeping the kind of uniqueness.
Yeah, and you find with artists like that it takes a lot of time for people to actually respect their creative choices, and usually when like a lot of years have gone by is when they stop being
Yeah.
like shocking, but actually start being iconic.
Literally.
And you can't plan for something to become iconic either. That's something that only time will allow.
No, 100%. Even like going off topic, but like is it Vincent van Gogh? He only became really famous after he passed away.
Yeah, and if he was alive today, he would definitely be TikTok famous. His work is brilliant.
Yeah, so good.
I'm talking to TikTok actually. There's a woman I follow called Look Up London with, I think her name's Katie, and she does like, she's like a tour guide. So she goes through like museums and stuff, and she posted about this artist from, I think it was the 1700s, and her name was Rachel Royce, and she was a Dutch artist, and she specialised in like still life, and some of her work blew my mind because you would think that it was a photograph. It was just super detailed. And what blows my mind even more is that this painter had 10 kids running around Gaff. 10 kids while she's trying to do a painting.
Unless the kids were helping her.
Who knows? But if they're anything like today's kids, I doubt it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I spend way too much time on TikTok.
Oh mate, it's so easy to fall into that trap.
I know, it really is. And you start off with such a disciplined, like, half an hour. Like, I'm going to spend half an hour on TikTok. And then before you know it, you've spent like 3 hours scrolling through shit. And then you see the woman in the mirror. Have you seen the woman in the mirror on TikTok?
No.
Right, I promise you, now that I've mentioned it to you, you'll definitely see her. So when you've spent too long scrolling through TikTok, you'll land on a video of a woman turning a bathroom light on and walking towards the mirror, and that's there to tell you that you've spent too much time on TikTok and that you need to get a life, basically.
Okay. So if I want to see her, go on TikTok for a lot of hours. Perfect.
So staying on the topic of time, how do you manage your workload? How do you delegate your time well? Because you're becoming more and more popular, you're getting more work in, more people want to work with you, your name's getting out there. How do you manage that time? And how do you keep each shoot completely unique from the last one within that time?
It's a good question. So managing work is just to try and have a schedule. Like obviously if I've done multiple shoots and I have multiple edits, so prioritize which shoots need to be done first, because the last thing you want is to get some work late over to a client, and then trying to mix up shoots and make them different. I think it really just depends. Like the beauty of working as like a photographer is you can kind of work in different genres with different genres of artists.
Yeah.
So like a lot of artists would have different styles. So like some artists might want some like really clean images, other ones might some like what's something I've done quite recently started getting into is like kind of the kind of long exposure effect.
I love a long exposure
Like
shot.
that kind of you can get some really creative stuff. So I have one shoot coming up and they want all like long exposure imagery, and then I have another shoot which is kind of like more cleaner stuff.
Yeah, we worked on a project where we explored long exposure.
Yeah, when's it coming out?
I'm not sure, but I'm hoping it's going to be sometime this year. But just so the listeners know, because we can't talk about it too much, we both worked on it. You did the shoot,
Yeah,
and I did the artwork, and we both fought tooth and nail to have this long exposure shot approved for the artwork. Do you remember?
I do. Yeah,
And
and
it
then
just wasn't happening, and it just weren't approved. And yeah, we were both pretty gutted about it. But you do have to fall in line sometimes, because that is the nature of the job.
you do. 100.
But we live in hope that it is going to be seen eventually, because it was beautifully done. That long exposure shot that we wanted for the artwork was
Yeah,
beautifully done by you.
thank you, man. I appreciate it.
And I'm hoping it'll be this year, because it's been ages. I mean, how long ago was it?
It was like what? 2 years now at this point.
2 years ago. God, that's crazy. That's crazy. But we shall see. And annoyingly, it's actually one of my favourite artworks I think I've ever done, and nobody's getting to see it. And I'm like, hurry up, where is it? Let's get it out there so I can show it off.
100%.
And it's always a risk to have that lying around for so long, because I can look at that now, maybe 2 years down the line, and would actually mentally make 1,000 changes.
I know, like, it reminds me, I have this image that I shot of an artist, and so they're a punk band, and this image is probably one of my favorite shots I've ever taken, because it sums up punk in one image, but because of what's being seen in the image and what the artist is doing in the image, I can't release it because it's quite, it could get them in trouble. But I really want to release it, but I haven't got approval, and I'm sure it'll be fine, but I don't want to take that risk at the same time.
Or you wait for the artist to become a bit of a recluse and it's used in a documentary, and then you get a shit ton of money.
Bingo. There we go. And then becomes even more popular.
Iconic.
Exactly.
So I was recently invited to go back to my old college to deliver a talk to the design students. And I was a bit hesitant at first, but it was one of the most rewarding things I think I've ever done. To go back to where I started, to actually come full circle, to go back and talk to the next generation of creative talent. So what advice would you give to any up-and-coming photographers that are trying to break into the industry?
Yes, I think if you want to break into the music photography, I think the key thing to do is, so I'll kind of go back in my story. So when I first started out doing music photography, I contacted local bands. So it's funny because a lot of photographers would know an artist when they get into it, but for me, I didn't know a single person that was a musician.
Yeah, and it's the exact same story for me. I didn't know a single soul who worked in music when I first started. I knew that I wanted to work in music, but I didn't know how.
There's ways. Like, the way I did it is I started emailing small bands, and I'm actually really close to some of them. So what I do is, there was a venue in Cork. So I'm from Ireland myself. There's a venue in Cork City called Fred Zeppelin's. So they have a venue upstairs, and it is a capacity of 50. So it's a tiny, tiny room. But for about a year, I shot in that room and other small venues. So I learned my craft through learning mistakes early on in that room. So the key is to, I think, learn your mistakes early on rather than make them when you're on a bigger scale. And just in like the great thing about social media is you can contact people. So like what I used to do is use Facebook to find email addresses for managers, email lots of different people, just offer to shoot them for free, and then if they like it, then kind of build up build up a friendship with them, and use those images then to apply to get bigger gigs, and then it almost snowballs from there. And the main thing is just to be nice, just be sound, just, yeah, be open to be open to work with any artist, because you never know, some of these artists could become huge, and if they'll remember you if you're sound, and might give you a call to kind of work with them then when they're in a bigger level.
Yeah, we've got very similar journeys because I started a very similar way where, the thing with social media now is that you can actually directly contact an artist, whether they reply or not.
Yeah, of course.
And it really paid off for me in the end because I was a bit of a pest.
I mean, you have to be. But the thing is, the worst I can say is no.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think most of them didn't even reply anyway, but one of them did, and it probably took about 2 or 3 years for me to get that one reply. Not that I was inboxing this artist for 2 or 3 years, that's not how it was, but I was like actively trying on like Instagram for maybe 2 or 3 years before I got that one reply.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, I tried my best to learn as much as I can about the music industry. But actually, one of the best pieces of advice I can give people is you probably won't learn that much until you're in.
That's it.
Until you're actually in the industry, because I learned more on the job than I did before I even got into it, and that's probably the best way to be honest. Like, there is nothing more valuable in the industry than work experience. And just before I got that one reply, I was ready to give up. But just from that one reply, it kind of snowballed into me being introduced to people at labels, being introduced to other managers, and the power of word of mouth, and it just sort of like, it kind of felt like it happened overnight, but actually when I think about it properly, it was maybe 2 or 3 years worth of like hustling to actually get that one reply, and it really paid off in the end.
The thing to remember is it didn't happen overnight. Anyone in that position worked for years just to get there. I think people outside the industry, like I've had a lot of people come up to me like, your job's great, it must be so easy, but to get to the level where we are, it doesn't happen overnight. You have to constantly grind. Like, for instance, you know the artist Lizzo?
Yeah.
So I saw a thing where she was before she like broke through. She was working at it for 10 years. She was doing gigs for beer. She was like with no money in her account, and because she constantly worked and grinded, it paid off.
And as hard as it is to remain motivated, you do have to be persistent, because it could just change your life. I'm in a really good position now where I don't have to hustle as hard, because I can get to pick and choose now what jobs I work on, because I don't necessarily need the work that much now.
Yeah.
Whereas in the beginning, when I was up and coming, I would take on all sorts of little bits of shit because I needed to prove myself.
Completely.
So I would take on like a lot of social assets, or I'd make someone else's artwork move, and it wasn't really fulfilling because it wasn't my artwork I was actually working on. But things have changed now because I don't feel the pressure to prove myself as much. I think I've already earned my stripes, to be honest, and I think that's probably the biggest reward that you can ever achieve as a freelancer.
It's a beautiful thing. It's like with Frozen Mode we both work on. Like they're getting bigger and bigger, and we've been doing all their stuff, which is really nice.
Yeah, and they are the hardest working group in the industry. They are working their fingers to the bone to get themselves out there, and it's paying off. And it's paying off, and they are so different. If you've not listened to their music, you need to check them out. So they're called Froze Mode, and their handle is @FrozeMode.
They're going to be huge.
They are going to be huge. They and you know what, they deserve it because they're so authentically themselves. They don't sound like anybody else.
Yeah, I believe so.
They don't act like anybody else. They are literally completely unique. You'll love them. Check them out
for sure.
They do kind of remind me of the early days of N-Dubz when they first came on the scene, and they did everything themselves, and they were all authentic to like real British culture. And you get that with Froze Mode. They represent all the corners of the country that is not glamorized in the media.
No, and that's how you do it. That's the story of any great artist. Every great artist has a story of how they've made it.
Yeah, with Froze Mode, theirs is authentic and really relatable.
Definitely authentic.
So just to finish off, Nick, because I've absolutely loved having you on and easing me into this gently on the first episode. But what does your end game look like? What's next for you?
So I think I don't necessarily have an end game. I think the end game for me is to just be able to do what I'm doing until I die. But I think over time I want to do art exhibitions, release some photo books, and be able to kind of encapsulate my stuff over time. And
yeah, that's a great idea.
And then I don't know. There's no particular artist that I haven't worked with that I really want to work with. But I think for now I really want to work with Tom going forward full time. Kind of capture his journey, because if you look at the likes of Youngblood or Inhaler or even David Bowie, they all had photographers. Like David Bowie had Mick Rock, who's a huge inspiration for me. Youngblood is Tom Palin, and then Inhaler have Lewis Evans, who's another great photographer. So I think just work with one artist or a number of particular artists and kind of capture their journey, and then over time be able to release books and release exhibitions and go down as maybe one of the great photographers in music.
Yeah, we're going to manifest that for you. We're going to manifest it. It will happen. It's great to have you on. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really nice actually to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Because we're always, although we work together on a lot of things, we're always really busy, so we don't really have the time or the chance to sit and have a proper conversation where we're not talking about work.
And we've never actually met in person, which is mad.
Yeah, that is mad. We need to change that very soon.
What's going to happen?
I went to a party just before Christmas, and it was a celebrity party. And usually I wouldn't ever go to anything like this because it's so far from my normal life that I'm not tempted by anything that the perks of my job has to offer, because I am quite antisocial. I'm not very glitz and glam, and it does not interest me in the slightest. But I went because I knew there'd be a lot of people there that I could meet for the first time who I'd worked with for years. And it was so good to actually be there and to meet them in person. But what was quite strange is it didn't feel like it was the first time I'd actually met them, because we'd spoken so often.
Yeah, literally.
So it was, I'm glad I went. It was great fun. And it was a fancy dress party as well, so I did pretty damn well to recognise people who were in fancy dress. So Nick, thanks again for taking the time to join me, because I know you're a busy man, and I'm excited to see what you're going to do next, and I'm looking forward to working with you again. It's been wicked.
Thank you again for having me. It's been really nice, and it's nice to be able to kind of talk about what I do. So it's always a pleasure.
And if you want to hear more from Nick and see some of his fantastic work, you can follow him on Instagram. His handle is @Nicholas O'Donnell.
Thank you, Cam.